Thanks, Jessica. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. It's good to see familiar faces already, so that makes it nice. This event, as you know, is scheduled to be sort of an informal kind of an opportunity, and I just made it the most informal today. I changed what I was going to say at 11 this morning. So you're you're getting the real deal here because there is no way that I will be dealing with any of the other material. The reason I changed it is because I wanted to talk about several different things related to where all of us have come from professionally, and then where we're going as individuals and persons with aphasia and aphasia access. But one of the things that I was really struck by when the notice came out about the session was basically it was a lovely description of me. I was really pleased I'd done all those things. And I looked at it and I said, wow, that's just really kind of diverse. Some of it is connected, but not all of it is. And maybe some of you have that experience sometime too. But what it made me do was go into kind of a bit of a retrospective mode. And in doing that, I had some thoughts I wanted to share and get you guys to talk about. Next slide. So, we'll hopefully find some things. Just for your humor, I put up the previous titles I had considered. So you know this was a work in progress. Next slide. What I'm really thinking about these days is, again, how and where all of us kind of found our oomph and our engagement, because everyone involved in aphasia access is a pretty passionate group. So I think it's rather special in that sense. But also I'm really interested in what happens with what future professionals, the ones that are in school now. Tom and I were just talking about that, and the ones going out in the field now. And I think I would like to kind of brainstorm. Maybe there's some ways we can really engage people and make it simpler, not real complicated and theoretical. So I'm probably going to get slapped around for that, but simple is the name of the game today. So next slide. Thanks. You all know the terms, the buzzwords. You know that they do matter because they very much dictate what we're seeing people follow up on the research. I am making no pretext at having a comprehensive guide here of terms. They're just ones that popped in my head. But one of the things I did last week or so was very unscientifically went back and looked in a series of articles from the early 90s, and then from 2000 and 2005, and then the most recent 5 years. And again, no science behind this. But what I expected to see is what I saw, which is we certainly do change the language. And when we change the language of how we talk about aphasia or people living with aphasia or caregivers, whatever, when we change the language, it really, it does alter our thinking to some degree. And that's what I think is, considerable interest, because it is influencing what we're saying and doing. We also, next slide, as you all know better than anyone, we have models and frameworks. Well, it was interesting to go back to the early 90s, and then suddenly within a relatively short time in the 2000, 2005 range, we had at least 3 models that were actively influencing us in terms of understanding the person living with aphasia. Some specific to aphasia, like LPAA. Others started to talk about aphasia, like AFROM, although it's designed that it could be used in a different way. And of course, ICF, which is becoming a general model. The value of these models is that it does let us grasp the complexity of the behaviors and kind of define what elements play into it. But it also is a kind of neat tool for communicating. So I'm a big believer in models and frameworks because they take complex material and they at least give us a way to handle it. So next slide. in my own retrospective search, and I hope some of you will talk about this later, I realized everything I have done professionally, any new interest, every different path, has come from a personal, often familial experience, a professional interaction with client or clients in most of our cases, and a need that was communicated to me by those folks. And it's almost like, for those of us who have been doing this a while, it seems that you've seen a gajillion clients, but over time, there's some you never forget. And when you kind of go back and look at why that's true, one of the things that is explanatory, but one of the things that you find is that you really learn to see that person in all his or her complexities. And when we saw the uniqueness in people, we began to understand what needs might be there that we hadn't looked at historically in the past. And so one of the reasons that I still am going to mention identity and mention stories today, Katie's here, she can be my backup, but one of the reasons that's important to me, because I think that's where we engage with those special clients, and in turn it influences what we do. And that's kind of stunning to me. I literally made a list of, I don't know, 20, 25 events or people, and I could pin them, each of them, to something that I had pursued in research or in the clinical activity. So it's been interesting, and I want you to think about it for yourselves too. Next slide. I would love to ask you now, but it'd probably be simplest for me to quit talking at you shortly and have us talk about it later, but be thinking about even your involvement with aphasia access. What is it that has drawn you into this special, intense interest? You know, many of us have talked about historically, when asked what influences, we talk about a professor or professors or an article we read, a book we read, even a theory. But I think for new clinicians to be, I think it's so crucial that they have an actual experience with a real person, or at the very least that they have an opportunity to learn about a person, in this case with aphasia, and their family and their situation. I had for years, actually it's still happening, I had former graduate students coming up to me and talking to me about Betty and how much they remembered about Betty and whatever happened to this and that in her life. And that was, they never actually saw Betty in terms of in person, but they saw a lot of video of Betty in a variety of circumstances. And they got a lot of information, and they were allowed to ask questions. What didn't you learn that you'd like to know more about? So I think it's worth thinking about in terms of looking down the road in the future. And I apologize, I have the dog, of course, who has decided to whine. Hopefully the dog will be quiet. Next slide. So one of the things I was thinking about today that made me kind of change my trajectory is that I think we really, sometimes we can do a better job of simplifying some of the things that we think are critical or key to our work and to the people we work with. And it works for me to discuss identity and self, and also to discuss stories and social interactions, because that's something I've done a lot with. But most recently, I've had 3 or 4 experiences where a total stranger ended up asking me a question about what I do. And in the past, I wouldn't even try to explain, but I figured what the heck. And so in each case, I explained, and I was talking about impact of aphasia on identity, and I was talking about how important stories are, even little stories that we exchange as people. One person was the van driver from the car place where my car was being repaired. And lo and behold, I'm thinking, this is silly, I don't know why I'm explaining it. And he turns around and he tells me in great detail about his I don't know, uncle, I think it was, who had just been diagnosed with ALS. And this guy says, I've been just thinking about this all the time, but I don't know how he's going to like be him if he can't talk. And I just went, that's so lovely. You know, I could spend 2 classes explaining the theory of identity and the theory of narrative and story, but wow, I mean, he got it. And that's something we want to be able to convey. Another example real quickly was I was having well, actually a glass of wine with the director of a theater here and with their visiting playwright. And I was listening to them talk about the reading that had been done of the play and, you know, just sort of being quiet. And at one point, someone said, well, I think one of the best parts of this play is that people like to hear a lot of stories. And I just sort of mindlessly chimed in and started talking about, yeah, stories are really important. Think about if you couldn't speak or you couldn't speak clearly, and you couldn't even tell someone what you did that day or what you thought of a show you saw last night. And I kind of went on for a while and I looked around and everyone was looking at me blankly. I said, I'm sorry. That was my personal professional thing. And everyone at the table said, but that's exactly right. And that's what theater gets right if it gets it right. And they were just going on and on. So I'm very encouraged that maybe different ways that we can educate the public and educate family and friends and connect with people on a pretty core level. So I'd like to talk about our students and what we think they can experience and how we can support them, not just in the theory, but also in the experience. So next slide.